Hey folks, welcome to Field Sketching Basics. Today what I want to do is show you in one workshop my highest percentage drawing techniques, the ones that I'm going to use again and again and again. So if you've watched a lot of my lectures, in this one you're going to see, oh, that's a real recurring theme that I've seen in a lot of these. And if you're new to this, today what you're going to see are the big ideas that will be in future workshops where we're, say, working on, how to draw insects or butterfly wings or something like that. You'll see these themes come up and again. And if you are aware that those are, oh, look, there's that big idea, you'll realize that I'm essentially kind of a one-trick pony. I've kind of got a few little tricks that work, and you can just apply that to whatever it is that you're drawing. But in one class, I wanted to kind of show you what I think are the best kind of high percentage ideas that I do constantly in my journal. And if you are not, if you missed the last month's workshop, just to remind you, the big overarching idea is that we're using drawing as a tool in our journals to help us observe more carefully, to help us pay attention to the world, to help us remember what we see, and perhaps to kind of slow us down to the point that we'll start to notice details that we otherwise wouldn't have seen. And if we keep that in mind, and that goal in mind, it just gives you permission to make lots and lots and lots of drawings. And that way, every drawing you do is successful. But if you make your goal, I want to make pretty pictures, I want to have a drawing that's a portfolio of pretty pictures to show other people, that can really lock you up and choke your ability just to draw freely. If you want to draw pretty pictures, the big secret is just make lots of pictures. And the more that you do that, the better and better your drawings will become. It really is more important than any trick, any lecture, any special pencil or anything like that. It's just making lots of pictures. And honestly embracing the idea of I'm going to sketch to observe, I'm going to sketch to remember and to wonder and to connect more deeply with the world is the big game changer, because it just gives you permission to sketch a lot. And then you sketch better. Right? So, that being said, should you want to sketch, here is my big list of the things I want to talk about today. And they're kind of in an order here that will sort of take you through this idea of what it, kind of the drawing process looks like. And if you want, you can, we have floor space available. It'll probably be a little more comfortable. But there is no one way to draw, there is no right way to draw. My approach to it is not the right way, is not the only way. The more that you do this, the better and better and better it's going to get. And it's a great idea to look around at the approaches of different people and see what how they're approaching things. And that's something that's fun with the Nature Journal Club, is you can look through the journals of all these other people on one of our field trips, and you've all been sketching in the same place, and you realize there are 20 different people here, there are 20 different ways of framing this in your journal. And I like that idea, I'm going to adopt that. So I'm going to show you some tricks that work for me, but just remember, this is a way of doing it, not the way or the only way of doing it. So let's just start with this first one, is start with observation. So you're out there, there's the bird. All right, now I want to draw it. What some people do is they start looking down at the paper, they start drawing away. And they're drawing this idea of what it should be like in our head. But because we haven't started with some really deep observation, what happens is that the idea in our head is really different than the real bird. Right? So a very powerful thing to do is to front-load any drawing experience with some direct observation. And just looking at something doesn't work. So you watch somebody who they go to the art museum, they walk up to the first painting, and what are you supposed to do in an art museum? You're supposed to look at the painting. So they walk up to the first painting, and they look. And they walk to the second one. And they walk to the next one. And it's sort of what we're looking means point your head towards it, and so people will be really good doing that through the art museum. And you talk to them later, like, wow, what was that experience like? And they're like, oh my gosh, amazing museum. Oh, the cafeteria is fantastic, right? And I got some burrito, Just because your eyes are pointed towards something doesn't mean we're actually seeing. Really observing what's there. So a very powerful trick to get you to do this first thing is to verbalize your observation. So when I'm out there in the field all by myself, I'm looking at a bird and I just start saying whatever it is that I see. And it used to look really weird to people, but now everybody just assumes you're on your telephone. So this is a very powerful way of getting yourself to notice more. And I'm going to put a video of a bird up here, and I'm just going to demonstrate this for you, and then you're going to try it. Right? I just want to give you a feel of what it looks like. It's just a stream of consciousness riff of the patterns that I'm seeing, and the shapes that I'm seeing, and things that I might want to sort of capture in a drawing. So, here's my bird, and I go, oh wow, bright yellow chest, black on the top of the head, and a black kind of crescent moon mask. Makes commas around either side of the face. Yellow eyebrows that cook down behind the eyes. There's a little pooch of yellow out a little bit behind the eye, and then it goes into green head. The black doesn't go all the way back, it goes halfway back the head, the same distance that crescent moon does. Yellow chest, line down the middle of it. Weecha, 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 weecha. And pink feet, longest toes in the middle. Greenish gray back with sort of a darker trim along the side. So you see what I'm doing? I'm just trying to get this stream of consciousness riff of observations going. And as it's changing, I'm just sort of like, oh, I can see something different, I see something different. If I see it, I say it. And then what happens is the bird flies away, and I've still got all this stuff richly in my head. Or maybe it's a really cooperative thing, and I've started with this, even though it's not going to be flying away. This gets me to notice all these discrete things. I've just taken this mental image that I had and made it so much better. Anything you say out loud, and it has to be out loud, anything you say out loud is going to get stuck in your memory, and it's going to be accessible to you. So we're going to all try this together now. You just start talking in a normal conversational voice. And I mean, if you're watching this at home, give it a try, all right? You're just going to sort of, I know it feels weird, you're there by your computer and you've got your little earbuds in and you're talking to your computer, but this is such an important thing for observation. Or you try this with any video online, give it a shot, or object in front of you. Everybody go. That's your cue. So, the tail's a lot shorter than Right? So now just pause for a moment and notice that anything you said out loud, it's still accessible in your memory. And if you just look at it, then you kind of go like, oh man, look, there's a bird, there's a bird. The bird flies away and you go like, that was a bird. Right? But anything you said out loud, that's still in your sort of mental database. Really, really powerful brain trick. And you can use this for all sorts of things, by the way. Right? You meet somebody at a party and you say, oh, hi, my name's Jack.
Oh,
and they, hey, it's really nice to meet you. And then you forget her name, right? But if we try it again, then we go, hi, my name's Jack.
Hi, I'm Sophia.
Sophia, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Right? If I say Sophia, it's nice. If saying Sophia, right, makes it much more likely I'm going to remember Sophia's name. Right? So, or, you know, you go in the house, you put your keys down, where are my keys? Right? Or you've parked your car, where's my car? So to avoid that problem, I know sometimes we'll look, oh, I'm in section G1. I'm going to remember that. How'd that work out for you? Right? But if you actually say G1, right, you're going to remember. Right? And actually there's some neat further follow-up research on this. Apparently if you say it with a little bit more emphasis, G1, that's even better. And the best thing is if you go, G1, right? And you do this out loud, you sing the name of that in the parking lot, you will remember. And the other person parking their car will remember you. Right? So that's the way we start. We look at the critter. That's where the discovery is. Now we're going to get that start to transfer down onto our paper, which is we're going to block in the major positive, that's the plus, and negative, the minus, shapes in a fast, light, and loose way. So what's up with this idea of positive and negative shapes? There's been kind of this debate in art circles for a while of, you know, is the best thing to do, like, let's say you want to draw the eye, Do you study the eye and learn about the structure of the eye and the parts of the eye and kind of how that is going to foreshorten and kind of have this accurate model of what eyes should be doing in your head? Or do you look at the eye, right? That drawing on the right side of the brain, anybody know that book? Amazing book on drawing. She makes a really great case in that book for really looking at the object itself. Sort of before that book came out, people were kind of like, if they're going to teach you how to draw, it's like, you know, I'm going to give you, like, I'm going to teach you about human anatomy, and then you'll be able to draw people. And so people were getting really good at sort of understanding like how many heads tall something should be. But she really helped bring it back to, you got to look at the actual shape that you're seeing and believe that. And that's perhaps more important than this model. So it's been like, what people are like, what should I be doing? Well, this has now been studied by science. Well, and what they did is they went and they looked at a whole bunch of different people and they looked at their drawing accuracy and to what degree are they doing these sorts of things. And it turns out, yes, you guessed it, they're doing both. The most effective people are doing both. They're getting a good mental, accurate model, an understanding anatomy of what is in front of them, and they're getting themselves to look at what they really see and those shapes that are in front of them. And that's what makes the difference. So if you're looking at a bird, thanks to Ashok Khosla for this cool photograph. So here's my little bird, cheep, 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 sitting up there singing away. So understanding the structure is something like this. I'm going to understand that underneath here, I have a body that's essentially kind of an oval body, a solid skull right here with an S-shaped neck connecting those two, so there's a lot of mobility between there. These feathers fluff out a little, these feathers can fluff out a lot. So I have these two big units that can kind of overlap. That's understanding structurally what's there, right? So that is essentially what's called the top-down approach. I'm going to understand the structure and then I'll be able to draw it. The bottom-up approach is looking at what's really there. And so compare this top-down thinking with, all right, okay, let's stick this tail into our bird. You could say to yourself, okay, so we're kind of seeing this at a 3/4 angle. That means the tail is going to be attaching at some point right back in here, and that's sort of a lump of tissue like this, and then they're going to, and you're thinking of how all these angles go back there. And what the drawing on the right-hand side of the right side of the brain book sort of suggests to us, like, wouldn't it be easier just to look at the shape of the air? Oops, oh, sorry. Here it is. So here's that structural thinking again. You're thinking, here's my body unit, here's my head unit. These can kind of move around. That's sort of understanding what's underneath those feathers. This second approach is look at the shape of the air right back here. And look at that as a real shape. It comes down, flat over to sharp corner, up a little, over a little, down a little. All right? That is a shape, right? And I'm going to train myself to see those shapes. That's what artists call a negative shape. And a lot of people kind of get used to, oh, I'm going to look at the shape of the bird. But look at, drawing this negative shape is just as important as drawing those positive shapes. And because there's no detail here, it's actually easier to see that. So that's a huge, huge trick in helping me be able to draw this. So how do I want to come up with a system where I use both of these together. And so I look at some object. Oh no, big complex object. I want to come up with a way of sort of simplifying this, understanding it, and I'm going to start with a sketch that's going to lightly, loosely frame in the basic shape of what I'm looking at. There is no one way or right way to do this. Often as you get a better understanding of the anatomy behind something, or the sort of meta-level structure of something, that does help you kind of come up with approaches. But this could look a lot of different ways, right? So trying to, how do you block this in? There's no one way to do it. That could be a bunch of different things. And the idea that you would naturally come up with would be something even different than this, right? But I'm going to make a light framework that is going to block that in. When I'm doing my little light frameworks, This is my favorite pencil. And I'm putting the kind of the details on it underneath here, because a lot of people have been saying exactly which pencil this is. And a bit of the confusion is that there are two kind of model numbers of the exact same pencil floating around out there, which confuses a lot of people. But either one of these that you get, you are fine. But this is essentially, it's a very, very pale pencil that makes the lightest kind of ghost mark imaginable on your page. So light that you'll barely be able to see it. And so I draw these little initial frame things out with that. Then when I draw on top of that with a graphite pencil or a pen, people don't even notice that those blue lines are there. You don't have to erase them. So it's an erasable pencil, but I'm not using it because it's erasable. I'm using it because it makes such a light mark. And sometimes people say, I made the mark with this and it's so light I cannot see that at all. And then what they do is they just press harder and they make a little groove in the paper. So instead of doing that, what you want to do is, if you need it to be a little bit lighter, you're just going to kind of go over that line a little bit lightly a few times. So you know, you're going to go like, instead of kind of going, there's a circle, you're going to be going, okay, yeah, okay, there. And as it's overlapping those lines, it's reinforcing those things. You're kind of building this thing out. So this is for this initial light, loose, sketchy diagram blocking in the positions of things. And for whatever you are looking at, it's going to be different. So this might be a way that I would block in drawing a deer. And notice that, again, this is using positive shapes. You know, here's my head, here's my body. And here's the negative shape. What is the shape of the air underneath this critter's legs? Right? And that turns into this piece. Notice that our eyes, when we see those dark lines, our eyes just kind of go ding, snap to those. You don't even have to erase those other lines. This might be kind of the framework that I would use for blocking in a drawing of a fish. Or something as simple as this might be just to kind of give me, I've got a tree with two tops, my major trunks are coming in here, it's going to be this wide, this tall for drawing that tree. Right? I know there's a lot of steps between this and this, right? And we'll get to all that stuff, but the important thing here is realizing that this ends up having the right shape because I blocked it in early. All right? So I put those lines down, and then the next thing I do is I'm going to just tweak and refine those, because those first lines that you put down are likely not to be in exactly the right place. And so what I want to do is to move them around, those parts around, so that my thing can have the right shape. I was watching an amazing scientific illustrator draw this a skeleton of a drawing of a mammal. She started with sort of this little skeletal drawing, and she was doing this digitally, like on the tablet that you've got there. And so she kind of sketched it out with her little Apple pencil, and then she selected the whole thing, and she said, I need it to be a little bit longer as a cheetah. So she was sort of like, she was pulling it out, and to make it like this, I'm going to move the head. And she grabbed the head and selected that and sort of moved it over to here. So she was kind of moving. So she had this drawing on her tablet. The initial kind of sketch of it, she was just sort of, once she got something down, she just kind of morphed it around. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do that on our paper? And the thing is that you can. You can. All right? And the way you do it is that this non-photo blue pencil drawing that you've initially put down, so this woman was an amazing illustrator. Amazing, amazing illustrator. And I'll put a link up to her site on the notes with this on the video. But her initial sketch had the wrong proportions. Right? So then she moved it around. And that's what happens to me all the time. I put down these original lines. If I kind of go like, there they are, I'm going to work with this. It's a little bit off, but I'm just going to go with it, right? I'm really shooting myself in the foot, because then down the line I get this detailed drawing with wrong proportions. But at the start, you can change all that stuff up. So do, right? So here's how that can kind of look like. So, you know, I've got this on paper. This isn't a tablet. How does that look? So let's go back to Ashok's marsh wren here. Here we go. I'm going to make a sketch and sort of show you how I kind of modify this thing. And So I start off just sort of saying it's kind of got a body posture like this, right? And so lightly and loosely on my paper, I kind of go, okay, your body's sort of at an angle like this. And then I'm going to put that sort of a positive shape of its body over that line, like sticking a hot dog on a stick. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the positive shape of the head. Right? And now here's the critical part. I don't just draw that head on. I look at it and say to myself, is that really where I want it to be? So how well did I do? How well did I do? So people are saying it needs to be a little bit further back. Right? I drew my bird kind of like this, and this bird is more like that. Right? So I'm going to draw in just a different head. Right? So just like I'm stretching something, moving something around on a tablet, I don't even have to erase this. I'm going to make that head smaller, kind of move it in here, do a big head way too far forward. I'm going to move that back. Actually, it's interesting. A lot of times when you're drawing birds, you'll see that the head is essentially hanging out behind the wall kind of the chest, right? Just like that. So that is a kind of common thing you see on a lot of birds. But look at how easy it is to change the position of my bird at this stage. All right? Now I'm going to start to kind of develop this further. Here's a line kind of coming out the front, sort of where the beak, upper beak goes. And I put a line in where the tail goes. All right? Sometimes when you're drawing something, you're thinking, okay, I know the tail goes in at the back of the bird, so I stick my tail in at the back of my bird. How did I do on my tail position?
Left. Are you drawing the front line or the back line of the tail?
Front line of the tail. It needs to come this way.
Yeah.
So this gentleman is saying, that line, that's way too far back there. Right? But that's sort of often kind of your thinking, like, okay, now I'm going to draw in the tail. I know where a tail should go. It goes at the back of the bird. And you stick that in. Sometimes when you're doing that, you know, it doesn't work out very well for you. So this is a great example of, let's use that negative shape to actually place that tail perfectly. So I'm going to look at the shape of the air back here. Look at the distance here and here. Alright? So when I just copy in that shape, that puts my tail all the way up here. Wow. I mean, so that's almost halfway down the bird, but look at this. And this little one over here. Right? So believe those negative shapes. For a long time, when I first learned about negative shapes, I would kind of do something like this, and I kind of, okay, now I'm going to put in that negative shape, and I'm like, that doesn't really fit. And I would just sort of go, and I try to like stretch my negative shape to make that fit. No, believe the negative shape. It's not lying, right? It's saying, bring that tail this way, right? And so another thing I'm going to just sort of block in the front of the chest, you have to be careful of curved lines when you're blocking these in, because what our brains tend to do when we're drawing a curved line, we get so into drawing this smooth curve that we lose sight of the fact that there are actual real inflection points in here, places where, you know, if I kind of, this is essentially, all right, that's actually a more, kind of seeing those corners on this is more an accurate approximation of this shape. There are places in the curve of that belly where there's more curve than other places, right? So if I just draw in my curve, I flatten all those out. I lose all those angles. So I'm going to exaggerate it. I can be really angular in this non-photo blue pencil sketch. So you see how there's a bunch of moving things around here? And you're not just stuck with your first static thing. You're going to have your first sketch, and then you kind of go like, really? Is that really right? Because I can still change things before I commit to any darker lines. So once I started using this non-photo blue pencil to block things in and realized how much plasticity there is in this early part of the drawing, and that's where you kind of catch all these proportion problems. I saw this one book on how to draw, and they went through this whole process of step-by-step how they're drawing a coyote, I think. And then they got to the end, and there's a little note, okay, and then just check the proportions. Yeah, so if you check them at that point, all you can do is go, darn. But here, you can catch a proportion problem and change it. Ah. Right, now, I had at this point planned to pass out non-photo blue pencils to everybody in the room. However, the previous workshops that I did had many more people than I expected. And I ran out of pencils. I ordered a whole bunch more. As a matter of fact, I've ordered hundreds more pencils for you guys. So the deal is, if you folks are willing to make, between now and when we meet next month, at least 10 drawings. All right? And in that, you're going to try, you can try just with a graphite pencil, sort of blocking this sort of thing in, right? Try to do that lightly, right? And then when you get your non-photo blue pencil, you'll be like, oh yeah, right? 10 drawings, you have earned your non-photo blue pencil. How many people should I plan on? All right? All right, so, all right, so give it a try. Mess with this sort of, this idea of a plastic, flexible, early start of your drawing. All right? Oh yeah, and that reminds me. So that sort of brings me to the topic of art supplies. Right? Buying art supplies can be really expensive. Right? This does not need to be something that destroys our bank account. So I get mine on, I go to, what is that, Office Depot. You can order these non-photo blue pencils on Office Depot. And then I give them to you. But some of the other supplies, journals and all these sorts of things, especially if you have a large family and you're all doing this together, those sort of costs can add up. Recently somebody gave me a big box of blank journals and pencils and watercolors and paints, with the goal of, can we get these out to families or individuals that would need some support in how to get art supplies. So if any of you in this room or people watching this video need some of those supplies, they're there for you and your family to make this thing something that you guys can do affordably and easily. So what I want to invite you to do, my website, my email, just shoot me an email. I'm johnmuirlaws.com. Nobody will know, and I will privately mail you a box of art supplies for you and your crew. And I think that so don't let sort of the economics of this be something that's sort of standing in the way, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is, you have to at some point put down the non-photo blue pencil, because that's not really your drawing. You don't put any detail into that non-photo. It's all those sort of scribbly lines, right? Look at how scratchy and scribbly that is. So I'm not carefully drawing it. I'm loosely blocking it in here. But now we have to put that pencil down and draw it. So if I have this little thing drawn, I have to put that down, pick up my graphite pencil, and draw over that. Right? There are some interesting styles that you can do with how you kind of put in your line work that's going to make your drawing more interesting. So one of these sort of ideas here is the idea of line variation. If I draw all my lines the same weight, the drawing is less interesting. But if I were just to randomly make some lines stronger and some lines lighter, I would get a much more interesting drawing. But I can also use line variation to make my drawing easier to read and to understand. So I'm going to show you 3 different approaches, and you can combine these together in any drawing to kind of mess with your line variation. So approach number 1. This is what people do with often with mechanical drawings or architectural sketches. The major structures and features and timbers they do with a heavier line, and the minor details they make a lighter line. So if I have, you know, here's my object, and it has, you know, a little light pattern on it, all right? I'm going to have that light pattern done with a lighter line than that heavier line on the outside of it. This helps people see the structure. So on this bird here, I might put a heavier line around the outside edge of it. So I'll sometimes kind of come in and do this after the fact. For me, it's hard to draw the bird and keep all these ideas in mind. So what I often will do is I will first start with, kind of draw my bird, and then I start drawing over that to get more detail. So before, after. right? So I'll draw over that, maybe a heavier line kind of popping out. Here's this big structural feature here. That's more important in kind of hierarchy of information than this. So you're making this hierarchy of information on your page. The second idea is depth. If I have a big heavy line, that will feel like something that is closer than a light line. All right? So notice that on this set of legs here, when they're the same weight, they sort of feel parallel in space. But the minute I make heavier lines around this one right here, this one feels closer to you. Or here around this corner of the mouth, I kind of reinforced that, and it pops that side of the mouth towards you. So before, and then I reinforce this side. That's a great way of showing depth. So I can show structure, I can show depth. I can also suggest shadow. So if I've got an object here, if I put a heavier line towards the bottom of that, you will often kind of get a sense of kind of the shadow of some object. Another way you can do that, you can take a little kneaded eraser, one of those little gray soft things, and if I came along here and just went tap, 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 tap along this upper ledge, it would just sort of make that feel like there's a little bit more light coming in there. So you can apply all these three approaches together in one drawing. Closely related to this is the idea of when I'm doing my drawing, I've got it already blocked in. When I start making my lines, the order that I put those in is usually what I call drawing front to back. So that means I'm going to start with those elements or things that are closer to me, and then I start working backwards in space. And I do this for two reasons. One is that if my objects have overlapping things, if I draw this one first, then as I'm drawing this one, I know where to stop because I've already drawn that thing in front. But also when I go back progressively like this, all the stuff in front, then the next layer, then the next layer. If I know I want to have lighter lines in the back, then each place that I'm stepping back, I go like, okay, new depth, new distance back there. I'm now going to go for lighter lines. So it can look something like this. Right? So how did I draw this tree? Oh my gosh, it's this complex thing. No. I first drew the part that was close. And then, with lighter lines stuck behind that, the next level. And then, with lighter lines still, the next level back there. So you get this sense of going back in space, and I know where to stop this line because I already have this other one drawn. So that's two advantages of drawing front to back. Is it helps me with overlap, and it also, I can draw bold, then lighter, then lightest. It's a really useful strategy for filling in those lines. So now, let's talk about values. Right? Values are the difference between dark and light. So if I'm just thinking of what's dark, what's light, here's my bird. This is my little value scale. It's going from this dark to this light. Very often in a drawing, if your drawing goes from this dark to this light, the drawing won't feel as dynamic as if you start to increase that value range. So one thing to think about is, how dark are you going, how light are you going? It doesn't have to be that in all pictures, but very often, I looked through a bunch of my drawings and discovered for a while that I was kind of just playing in this part of the value range. And I got a lot more punch in my drawings when I started to intentionally be able to pull it out this way. The second thing about values is that my brain has, you think about how many different shades of gray can your brain really map out and keep track of. Right? So our computers can do millions of shades of gray. You know, if you think of, say, 50 Shades of Grey, so first of all, terrible movie, but you know, if you're thinking of the difference between 49 and 50, like, what does that look like? That's so subtle that our brains can't really pick up on it. You'd be like, you're at the optometrist. This one? Or this one?
Yeah.
This one? Or this one? Like, I'm really not seeing it. Okay, this one? Or this one, right? You know, and or some people say like, okay, 10 shades of gray, right? You know, you're thinking, and then I've seen people sometimes out there in the field and they've got these little kind of value matchers and there's a hole in it and they're like trying to go like, okay, is that number 9 or number 10? Number 9 or number 10? Number 9 or 10? My brain can't handle that, right? For me, I do most of my drawings with either 3 or 4 shades of gray. And then what people do, this one has 4, but people will then look at it and their brain will fill that in. Right? And, but I can look up, if I'm looking at something, it's possible for my brain to simplify, okay, if I'm just thinking about 3 or 4 shades of gray here, what are my darkest darks? What are my lightest lights? And then what are those 2 things in between? Or that 1 thing in between? So your brain will think about values better if you give it a smaller range to work in. Right? So I have 1 value, I have 2 values, I have 3 values, and I've got a 4th in here, that dark. Right? If you can place 4 values, let's kind of go back to our little bird here. Squint at this. When you squint, you see values better. So squint at this and notice, ooh, dark, dark, dark on the chest. Some dark up here, some dark over there. Okay, that's my darks. Medium, okay, I've got some medium in here, some, right? And then I put those values in. I think I actually should have made the breast a little bit darker and this a little bit lighter. Right, notice that. This light chest in shadow is actually darker than the dark back in sun. So easy for us to go like, oh yeah, it's white chest, it's going to be lighter. But in this case, you look at a lot of the drawings of Fuertes, and Fuertes, the bird artist, he actually draws his birds in sun, where that chest is in shade is actually darker than the dark back of the bird. If that's what you see, that's what you draw. Here I kind of got sucked into like, oh, I know it should be darker back there, right? So believe the bird, right? But notice the simple value scale here. And but it doesn't feel like, oh, you're using 3 values. And then there's color. All right? So color. Color's kind of a weird thing. Here's my bird, and I want to color it in. Very often when we think of color, what we think about is local color. Like what is, like, you know, the back is brown, the shirt is blue, the shorts are red, right? But colors change dramatically just with a shift in the light, right? But what our brains do is we see that person with a red shirt walking in and out of light. We're not going, oh my gosh, look, your shirt's changing color. That's so freaky, right? I gotta get me one of those, right? That's crazy, right? Our brains do what's called object constancy, which means like, yes, red shirt, shirt is staying the same and it's just walking in and out of light, even though the color is dramatically shifting. So what color something is, things can be all sorts of different colors and still look right. So the good news is, on your colors, you've got tons of wiggle room about, well, you do something in real evening light when everything is looking orange, it's looking orange. And making that white bird orange, right? Or making that, you know, that here's my orange and purple-gray bird, right? There are times when that bird looks like that. So with color, you have tons of wiggle room. But it ends up that we get so wrapped around the idea of trying to, I want to match that color exactly, gotta match that color, that we lose track of the values. And it turns out that a drawing where the values are good but the colors are totally off will look great. But a drawing where the colors are exact but the values are off is going to look really funky. So the lesson here is value is much more important than color. But all of us overstress, overemphasize the importance of matching that color. I would say a more important goal is to match the value that you see. Because colors can be all over the map and still look good enough. Right? If you're making a field guide, you want to try to match colors. Because somebody might be looking at that. So don't just, because I know it's a blue bird, that doesn't necessarily mean I reach for my blue. I want to look at that bird in this light, and I'm not going to assume I know what color it's going to be. And when you start doing that, you'll realize that all sorts of things have crazy colors. What is the color of that thing in shadow? Oh my gosh, right? That, brown bird just sort of turned blue over there in that shadow. I can't draw that. Yeah, you can. But values are the really important thing. And a word on color. We'll delve into this a little bit more in some other workshops, but if you are starting to mess around with color, color can be extremely frustrating. I was in the middle of the California desert trying to paint a pink cactus blossom, and I could not match that color for the life of me. And I didn't know why. And I can prove to you why at another time. And this is best done where you're actually experimenting with this, with real paints in front of you. But just because this is an introductory class and this is such a critical concept, I'm going to present it to you now and I will prove it to you later. All right? I thought that pink was light red. And so what I was doing is trying to add white or water to it. I couldn't match it. I tried to add all these other colors to it. I couldn't match it. And it turns out when you make a color wheel with red, yellow, and blue, first of all, there's no pink on that color wheel. Turns out if you lighten red, what you get is light red. Right? And also, all the purples that you make are the colors of bruised plums, and the greens are fairly dull. So you get nice oranges, but bruised, dull, no pink. So a friend of mine said, well, why don't you just get pink paint? And that was really unsatisfying to me. But finally I gave in and got pink paint. And it turns out that pink paint works, right? Yeah. So this is magenta paint. You lighten it and you get hot pink. That's where hot pink is hiding. It's not actually in red. So how do you make magenta with red? It turns out that you can't. So here's a couple of different reds. We're diluting them. This is alizarin crimson. This is magenta, and it turns pink. So the weird thing is, you cannot make magenta with red, but this is yellow acrylic, this is magenta acrylic. What color is that?
Red.
That's red. This is the same thing with watercolor. You can mix red. And you're not going to believe it just looking at this. You think, oh no, you got some other paint, you put that in there. But this was actually mixed. Right? And we'll do this in front of you at points in the future. Turns out, red is not a primary color. Blue is not a primary color. Magenta is, and cyan is. So this is a blue I mixed from cyan and magenta. All right. So a color wheel made with cyan, yellow, and magenta, you can make blues, you can have cyans, you get bright, vivid greens, you get vivid purples, you can make reds, you can make oranges, yellows, you dilute the magentas, you get pinks. All those colors are waiting in there. And when you put that color wheel up next to a red, yellow, blue color wheel, you realize you've got much more vibrant, clear colors with cyan, yellow, magenta. Essentially, your color printer has known all along. Right? Your color printer at home, it has no need for red ink. It makes red whenever it needs it. By taking a squirt of magenta And this works with colored pencils, this works with oils, acrylics, tempera, everything, right? And we'll prove this to you more later. So that's a little bit about color. The last piece on this whole business is a word about detail. And detail is fun to put in, right? But the hard thing is, here's our bird with values. You have to put in a little bit and stop. As you start to put in, it's like putting salt into a soup. You put a little bit of salt in, you go, oh, that's better. I'm going to put a lot of salt in. And you kill it, right? So detail is exactly like salt. Here's my drawing, a little bit of detail, bing, it pops. So I added a little bit of detail here on the wing, some spots in the tail. Around its eye where I want to draw people's attention, I added a little bit of texture and detail in there, and a little bit of detail on the foot that was closer to me. So I'm going to add detail on the parts of the drawing that I want to draw people's attention to, or I want to feel like they're closer to you. And then the hard part is you have to stop. The trick is to stop before you think the drawing is done. Because, say here is well, I'm going to move. Right? Here's a little drawing of a deer pelvis. A little bit of detail, pow, and it pops. But it's so much fun to do, and it kind of draws your, with where you put in the detail, it kind of draws your attention over in here. Right? Without detail, oh, nice. Notice limited value range. Right? You put in detail, bang, it gives this punch and focus. But it's so much fun to do that we tend to keep putting in detail, keep putting in detail, and putting in detail. And when the detail is everywhere, there's no place for your eye to rest and no focus. And so stop before you think you're done. So we've got this idea of lightly modifying the picture at the start. We'll begin with looking at it. I'm going to get something down on paper. I'm going to modify that. Then I'm going to work on those lines, and I can think about how I'm messing with those lines. Putting in value, more important than color. Right? When I am messing with color, I've got cyan, yellow, and magenta. And then detail, a little bit at the end, and then stop. So unlike a turkey that goes, the thing pops out when it's done, it's not going to happen in your drawing. You're only going to kind of know when you've overworked something. And so you have to stop before you think you're done. Those are my big drawing ideas. Are there any questions at this point? Yes?
I do watercolors, and I don't recall any color called cyan.
Right. So, the thing that's really interesting is that there is a pigment that is cyan that you have been using. It's phthalo blue, right? And so, but for some reason they call it phthalo blue, so you say, well, isn't that a blue? The chemical name for that pigment, when you look, is phthalocyanine, right? They take phthalocyanine, cyanine, right? Cyan. It has cyan in its name. And they make a pigment out of it and then call it blue. So cyan is not blue. Cyan, what you want to start doing, it turns out actually, this is kind of an interesting psychological thing, is that when we have a different term for a color, we start actually seeing that color in places where we had just been mixing it with other sorts of things. There are tribes in Africa that do not have a term for the color blue. And you show those people a swatch of paper with all these blues on it and a green, and they can't pick out the green from the blues. Because it's actually not part of their vocabulary. They're therefore not seeing it. So our vocabulary actually changes the way in which we see. It's crazy. Ancient Greeks may have been the same way. All that stuff about the wine dark sea, there was no blue in their vocabulary. So, when you start saying cyan, all of a sudden, and distinguishing cyan from blue, you'll start to see cyan everywhere, and the same with magenta. And all of a sudden, you'll realize that, oh wow, that bird, I thought that bird was red. That bird is actually magenta. And you've just improved this term. Like on the sort of red, orange, yellow side of the spectrum, you've got all these different terms for all these different subtleties. But then we get to, there's blue and green. And for this huge area of colors, we've just got blue, green. And sometimes we'll say blue-green, right? But actually noticing where cyan fits in there gives you this really, really useful tool. And you don't describe cyan as blue-green, because cyan is here, and blue is on one side of it, and green is on the other. That's just like calling yellow a red-green. Right? So if cyan is a bluish-green, yellow is a reddish-green. Right? What you actually want to do is say the name of those pigments. So you have a really good one, and it's phthalocyanine. Cyan. And the best magenta, if you're using Winsor Newton, they've got quinacridone magenta, awesome pigment. If you're using Daniel Smith, I like quinacridone pink. Yep.
I have some, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think I have magenta.
So oh, here we go. So let's take a look. This is an introductory workshop. How many people brought colored pencils with them? Oh, yes.
I just have a quick question. With your values, are you using just the same pencil with different, okay, so
Yes.
not four, like say,
Right.
3 different pencils?
Yeah, I do. This whole drawing is mostly done with one pencil.
Okay.
All right. So my go-to pencil is a number 2 pencil. I mean, not a number 2 pencil, a 2B pencil.
2B.
So 2B pencils allow me to punch in real darks where I want them. An HB or a number 2 pencil, it's still just sort of a little ghosty sort of mid-tone when I really punch it in.
Okay.
And so that seems to work pretty well for me. So most of my stuff, my go-to kind of sketching pencil is a 2B. Let's take a look at colored pencils. Because colored pencils are a really, if you start sketching on a regular basis, there's nothing wrong with doing all your sketching and journaling using just graphite pencil or pen. You do not have to add color to it. My favorite illustrator, William Barry, did almost all his stuff with just a sharp pencil. And I love his observations and his field journal. But if you want to add color, colored pencil is a very, very accessible way to start adding that into your system. You don't need the gazillion colors. What you do want to do is just get a sort of small set of colors. You can get a 24 set. And then you want to add in a couple of extra pencils to it. But you can just take a 12 or 24 set of colored pencils. You'll find that this is going to work really well if you kind of augment it with a few bonus pencils. The way I suggest that people organize their pencils is exactly like this man has them right here. Check this out. I'll give this back to you. All right. So here are all the warm oranges and yellows. Over here, he's got blues and greens. Over here, grays. So it's easy for him he'll just kind of go, I know in this little handful is going to be what I'm looking for. It's easier than having everything together in one, right? And so you can easily pull out your pencil and get it back into there. So one way of doing that is you can have your warms, your cools, and then you can have everything else together, or you can separate your greens and have your kind of neutrals and grays over here. I will sometimes use a little hair tie and put them around. They often last a little bit longer than rubber bands. And also, then if you get caught in a windstorm, you can take it off. You've got long hair. That way you have bonus hair tie. But this is a really good way to organize your pencils. That's better than having that cardboard box. Thank you. That cardboard box, you're done with your pencil, and now you put it back in your box. The one you use the most, now it's dropped into that void, you can't get it. And then you also spend all this time going like, I want to get this one back in the right place, you know, and you're trying to like put them in the Roy-G Biv order or whatever it is. So this little kind of bundling them like that, that's a great strategy. And then, may I borrow this? I'm guessing they travel around in here? So this is a rough enough little pencil case that it's going to protect those tips. Very good. Good system right there. The secret with colored pencils and why you don't need a million colors is that instead of getting all your colors and going, this pencil here is the closest color to that, and now I'm going to color in with that pencil, what you do with colored pencils is just like with watercolors, you can blend them together and make all these other different colors. And the secret is not to press too hard so you smash down the texture of the paper. But if you have a lighter touch, there still is that kind of sparkle of the white paper through. As long as you see that sparkle, you know you still have paper texture, and you can add another layer of color on top of that, and where they combine, you can mix your colors. So these are greens that are mixed by putting these, a yellow and a cyan together. I got that green. All right? So that's a mixed green with colored pencils. Interestingly enough, look at how dull it is if you use blue and yellow. Blue, not a primary color. Cyan, primary color. Alright? This is a color wheel that I made from taking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 9 different colored pencils. Magenta, yellow, cyan. So I have, this is my red pencil. It's a green pencil. This color wheel here, I mixed with a cyan, a yellow, and a magenta pencil. And all these are just mixes with that pencil. So the secret is light layer and another light layer and another light layer. And you can, as long as you maintain that texture of the paper with colored pencil, you can go bump, 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 and mix all these colors together. And you get much more dynamic, interesting colors. Where there's sort of some life sparkling and variation sparkling back to you rather than orange.
So which yellow did you use?
I think this is canary yellow. So these are some Prismacolor pencils here. In Prismacolor pencils, so what you want to do is, if you get your set, let's go kind of go into this idea of what would be the pencils that I would add to the basic set. Unfortunately, the basic set of pencils doesn't come with magenta. And the Prismacolor pencil that says magenta on it is not magenta. The Prismacolor pencils that actually is the magenta color has the odd name of process red. Process red. So
That's used in printing.
right. So process, that term is, so the process colors are cyan, yellow, magenta. There is no process red. Right? There's process magenta. But they call this process red just to confuse us. Their best cyan they call true blue. Right? Drives me nuts. And then I use canary yellow. If you are using, there's another brand of pencils that I really, really like. They kind of keep a sharp point and they drop down really rich color. Those are the Faber-Castell Polychromos colors. They're a little bit more expensive than the Prismacolor ones, but really, really rich to work with. In that line, their best magenta is something called fuchsia. So if you're using those Polychromos pencils, you want that fuchsia one. So I would buy a basic set of pencils, and I would supplement that, making sure that I have, it will come with true blue and canary yellow, but it won't come with process red. So go get yourself a process red or a fuchsia pencil.
Where
Yes.
do you buy that kind of special color, just one color?
What you want to do is go to a small independent art supply store in your neighborhood. Up in San Mateo, I've got Flax there.
It's not small. In San Francisco's huge.
Yeah, but it's different than a chain.
Oh, Jaron Brothers.
Right. So I want to encourage people to, where possible, go to small, independent, local businesses rather than buying things online and rather than buying things from big chains. Where it's possible. Sometimes it's often less convenient. Sometimes it's more expensive. But there's a real beauty to having those independent sellers, and often the people in those, you know, they know art. Like you go up to Flax in San Mateo, they're all like the staff there. They do art, and there's like the watercolor guy, and he does real watercolor and can really help people with things. And in that store you can go in and you can buy individual pencils of all these different colors.
I guess in this area it's University Arts on Meridian.
Great.
Or in Palo Alto has a small University Art. There's also Awesome Arts, which is on California Street.
So, and the same thing, by the way, with bookstores, right?
If you can find one.
If you can still find a local independent bookstore, here's what I want you to do. So people at home, try this, right? You can go online, find the name of the book that you want and its ISBN number. And then you take that and you go downtown to your local independent bookstore. And you walk in there and say, here's the ISBN number that I found online for this book that I want to buy. Would you order this for me? They order it. It comes to the store and then you go and you pick it up. Here's the deal. It will be less convenient. It'll be more expensive. Right? And so worthwhile doing. Right? And as long as you accept that, okay, it's going to be less convenient, it's going to take longer, and it's going to be more expensive. But you know what? This is kind of keeping, but this is part of my community, and I want to have more choices of books. Where they're, that's a sacrifice that where possible to make. You can also buy directly from the authors, right? So buy directly from authors, local independent stores, gotta support. That's right. All right. So, two other colors that I absolutely love with colored pencils are Prismacolor's Black Grape and Prismacolor's Grade Lavender. Black Grape and Grade Lavender. And the deal with these is that these are the easiest shadow colors. How to make shadows with your pencils. So black grape, if I draw just some, if what I do is I first put some black grape, I draw in the shadow on whatever object I'm drawing with my black grape pencil. And let's say it's a red bird, I then just take my red pencil and I put it right over that black grape. This, I get a shadow on my red thing. So this is black grape first with red on top of it. Black grape with green on top of it. Black grape with cyan. Black grape with orange. It makes great shadows on every color except on yellow. A little bit too intense here in yellow. So for yellow, that's where the grade lavender comes in. All right? I put in my shadow with my grade lavender, I go over that with the yellow, and boom, I have a shaded yellow sphere. So those are my two kind of go-to shadow colors. It kind of looks like this. Here's my birdie, and I'm now going to get, it's got a yellow chest, so I'm going to put grade lavender down in here in the shadow, and do some of these other shadows with black grape. So any part that has yellow, I'm going to do with grade lavender. All the other parts get all their shadow and work with this black grape. And then, with a light touch, I'm going to start building up layers of colors. So my first step here is my shadows. Then, this bird is going to have kind of an olivey back. And so I put in a little bit of, this was with a Prismacolor Tuscan red pencil, a little bit of red-brown. If that red is in the background, it's going to kind of make my greens a little bit. So sometimes you put a green down and it's like too like screaming electric green. And you want it a more muted color. You put a little bit of Tuscan red in there first. That red is going to mute that green. Then, here's yellow. Look at how that yellow on top of the grade lavender. Look at that. Ooh. Right? Because it's a little bit purpley, it mixes with the yellow and makes this sort of soft brownish gray. And it feels like it is part of, it feels like a convincing shadow on this shape. Now I'm going to keep adding light, see, you can see all that sparkle of color through there. Alright, light layer of olivey green. A little bit too olivey, I put another coat of green on top of it. I put a coat of, I want it to be a little bit lighter. I'm going to put some yellow on top of that. So you can add layers of color as long as you did not initially smash the texture out of your paper. That's why light touch, light touch, light touch, light touch. A little bit of color in the beak and the legs. And there's a birdie.
What was your black?
So this black here is a lot of black grape. Here, black grape. And then I'm in here putting in some of a deep, kind of a dark blue, a little bit into here as well. So the secret there is layer, 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 layer. And you've got these great pencils for putting in your shadow effects. All right? I used to really not like watercolor pencils because very often what I found is I would draw my drawing, then color it in, then I would put water on it and all my detail would smear. And also sometimes there's this a value and color shift, hue shift. Excuse me. There's a value and hue shift when you add the water to it. So you mix up a green and you really like that green, it looks like the leaf. You put the water on it and all of a sudden it's screaming chartreuse. Anybody here using watercolor pencils? All right, some. So I didn't like that. Two things have changed my mind about watercolor pencils. One is I found a line of watercolor pencils that I really, really like. They're the Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer line of watercolor pencils. And they do less of this kind of color shift on me. I like the way that they work both with water and just using them as a regular colored pencil. You can use it, if you don't add water to it, watercolor pencils act just like colored pencils. Right? So, but you can do this cool water thing with them. So the water thing is, let me kind of just demo this. And also kind of, let's talk about sort of order of operations. The first thing you do is you put down layers of color and build up whatever you want. So this, for instance, this black about here is a combination of that Tuscan red, brown, there's a dark blue, and there's also a green in here. So I just put down 3 pencils in there. This orange planet here, you can see yellow, I've got some purple in there, there's a little bit of red in there, there's some orange in there, there's a bunch of different colors that are sparkling back. That's layer, 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 layer. Then I got a wet water brush and started here in the middle of this highlight and started to circle out from there. Alright, that's pretty cool, isn't it?
Never works the rest.
Alright, so the secret here in kind of keeping this would be working out. This works in small areas. I find I kind of try to blend out a large area with watercolor pencils and it gets funky. It gets really funky. Also, if I have too much water on it, it takes all the color and just sort of concentrates it down into one little kind of splotch. Alright? So I blend that out, and then here's the secret. Remember back here, I still have the texture of the paper. Here, I still have that texture of the paper, so I let this dry completely, bone dry. That's the secret. You dry, 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 and then I can draw right over the top of that with more detail. Because I still have that texture there, I can now draw over that. So this is now no water added. This is just either regular colored pencils or it could be your watercolor pencils, it doesn't matter. But I'm not adding water to it anymore. So here's another example of that, here with a bird. And in this, I'm going to do, because I've got this kind of really do some interesting stuff with the shadow, I don't want to, I want to get sort of some shadows in here. I don't want those to kind of get smudged around with the colors. In this case, I'm going to start with just my order of operations. I'm going to put in a coat of just the local color. So it's got yellow breast, I'm going to put yellow in. Then add the water, then add my shadows, and then continue to draw on top of that with my regular pencils. So it's going to look like this. Here we go. Just a little bit of color in these areas. Notice I'm not smashing this down. I've still got texture in there. These lines, by the way, this is not with watercolor pencils. This is with a regular colored pencil, so that when I put water over it, these lines here will still remain. Put down watercolor pencil, and then watch what happens when I put the water on it. Ooh, smooth. Again, watercolor pencil seems to work nicely in small areas, not in big zones. Then I can get out my black grape and my grade lavender and draw in my shadows. And just use other colored pencils to further develop these blues and yellows and add more detail. Oh, here black, that's just black colored pencil. And more colored pencil on top of it. So now I'm just layering more colored pencil on top of this. And also I've taken a white colored pencil and kind of just put it up in here. Let's back up one and see. So building up layer, 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 layer. So watercolor pencils, I realized there's just one thing I was doing is using them wrong. So the reason that they were, I don't want to put in my detail and then add water. All that detail comes in after the water. So there's an initial color stage, then water, then let it dry, then you rework over the top of that. So you're essentially giving yourself a little background to work on. Just one more demo, this time with a flower. Here I'm making my lines with colors of the pencil, colors of the object that I'm going to be drawing. Right, so instead of having a brown line or a black line, these lines can sort of blend into the rest of my drawing. And I then just, as you're sort of imagining making a kind of colored pencil drawing, I am putting in my blues, my purples, my greens in there, and then I can add water. So without the water, but notice this kind of, I like this sort of texture, kind of seeing some of those sort of striations. Notice that all that disappears. All this sort of nice line stuff disappears as I put that water on. That used to bug me. But now I realize that that's sort of a feature. Because you're just building this back zone, let it dry completely, and then start drawing on top of that, and you can put it back. Alright, so now you've got just, you have that little sort of highlight shining through. Ooh, that looks cool. And then, as I kind of, towards the end, I'm going to really kind of punch in my line work. Detail is the last thing that I add. Right? Notice that I'm not really putting in my detail yet. At the end, I come on, I put in my detail, and I stop. So that's a watercolor pencil iris. So, in this workshop, we've looked at kind of a series of drawing tricks and put them into kind of a flow, realizing that the start of a drawing is this very flexible point. But the more that you start to commit to lines and add in detail, your flexibility goes away. You're now assuming that you've got those basic shapes worked out. And if you've checked and modified your shapes, you have worked that out. You can now work on your line work, your values, your detail. If you choose to do color, right? Colored pencils are a really effective way to make that happen for you. It's a ton of fun, but the important thing isn't listening to this talk. The important thing is, what are you going to do with it? So your brain is about to take all the information you've just learned, select it all, and delete it. Right? Unless you show it that actually I want to do something with this. So that's where the 10 drawings come in. And what I'd like you to do is, between now and the next time we meet, is do 10 drawings. Those can be just 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. It can be a 15-minute drawing. So that doesn't mean you have to find an hour, 3 hours to go do a big drawing of something. But carve out a few little spaces and just sit down, do a drawing from start to finish, right? Be kind of a quick sketch of something where you're kind of getting yourself to do that introductory part where you want to play with, did I get the head in the right place? Do I want to move that around? Really kind of experiment with, how can I make the beginning part of my drawing more plastic and flexible? And then once I've got that blocked in, you can then go forth. As you're putting in your lines, play with that line variation. Think of values as not just this range of dark to light, but each of those different steps has a real shape to it. And then as you play with color, you can experiment with shadows with black, great lavender. By the way, if you do your shadows in a colored pencil drawing, and you put the shadows in with graphite pencil, it's going to really smudge and not really make you very happy. But play with those and see what happens. It really is a numbers game. The most important thing is those pencil miles to take this stuff and lock it into your head. You mess with this a little bit, then it's just going to be part of your repertoire. Whenever you need it again, it's going to be right there for you. Every month I'm going to be back here with a new set of tricks for you. And next month is No Fear Watercolor. So how to make watercolor work for you in the field, to just the logistics of it, to how do you apply it in a way that is going to be much more kind of loose and friendly. The month after that, we've got a really fun guest lecturer who's going to come and do a program on perspective for nature journalers. And we also may have a return visit from Lori Wiggum to the approach to watercolors is I'm going to be showing you. It's very kind of controlled and kind of She's got a much freer, looser way, and you've kind of gotten an introduction to it with the No Fear watercolor class. She'll then show you there's actually this whole other world of possibilities of ways you can work with this that'll be really, really exciting. So it'll be kind of a good order for those two workshops. So a lot of fun stuff coming up. The most important thing, though, is you deciding to kind of give yourself permission and the chance and to be vulnerable enough to throw yourself into it and try. Start putting those drawings down on paper, and that's what makes the difference. Thank you so much. I hope this was useful.